Welcome everyone to this first Spotlight video interview. We are very happy today to have with us and host Dr. Francesco Baschieri. I hope the pronunciation is good.
Perfect.
Francesco, welcome to the Meshwork. Welcome to this interview. Thank you for agreeing to do that with us. So you come a long way from what we see in your CV, starting from Italy and now as a newly appointed assistant professor in the University of Innsbruck. Do you want to tell us more and guide us through your journey
Sure.
here?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for organizing this, Costantino Dimisha. I'm very happy to be here. So, short bio. I was born and raised in Italy, which means I went to school in Italy. I did my university years in Italy. I didn't do any Erasmus because, well, for several reasons. So at the time, it was not as popular as it is now. I think I've read some statistics that now 1 every 2 students in Italy goes somewhere for Erasmus, which I think is quite good. But yeah, in my case, I don't know. I didn't feel like stopping all my activities for like 6 months. I'm always being quite active, so I just wanted to finish my studies. And after my studies, then it was okay. I now have a master. I want to go for a PhD. I decided during my masters that I wanted to go for a PhD, not before. And during master, I started to search, and I found a PhD in Germany. So I was looking for a project that was interesting for me, and the choice in the end was on cell biology. But also there was some very naive reasoning at the base. I remember I was excluding all the countries that are English speaking, because my very, very naive reasoning of a 23-year-old was, if it doesn't work, at least I will have learned a language. So I wanted to go somewhere else. I already spoke English, and I wanted to learn a different language. I went to Germany. I was very lucky because sometimes you also need luck. I found a lab that was very supportive, a lab where I could do good research, learn how it is to do research. I had the opportunity to do a lot of experiences, and after the PhD, I was really sure I wanted to go for a postdoc. Okay. And for the postdoc, I choose based on the project. I found a project that I liked, and it's at that time that I started to be interested in the extracellular matrix, because for my PhD, I was really 100% in cell biology. It was protein trafficking, Golgi, pure cell biology. And then at this stage, I realized that you cannot really isolate the cells. You want to put the cells into a context. And I wanted to go for a postdoc in a lab where the context was taken into account. And I found a lab in Paris with Guillaume Montagnac, who was just starting. Same for my PhD. I went to 2 newly formed labs. And with Guillaume, we played around with physics. It's like we started to generate substrates of different rigidities. We compressed cells and all these things in the context of cancer. So it was a lot of fun. I stayed 8 years in France, so it's not that I didn't like it. But yes, after 6 years of postdocs, I got a permanent position. It's the very typical way France works. But at this stage, I realized it was going a bit too slow for me. I wanted to be able to have my own team. And there, the networking was very important, because with my networking that I developed during the years, I got this news that there was an offer in Innsbruck. And it was my former PhD supervisor, Hasso Fahren, who had moved to Innsbruck after being in Norway for some years from Germany. So I went out of curiosity. I liked the place. I saw that there was potential. So I decided to move. And more or less 1 year ago, I moved to Innsbruck to start my own research group.
Yeah, so you didn't have an Erasmus, but you had a lot of mobility in your career journey. And we were wondering how hard was for you all those mobility for the different steps of your career, and also you changed subjects as well. And how necessary do you believe that this mobility is for a researcher?
So I think mobility is important. I wouldn't say fundamental. Of course, you can be also a good researcher if you don't move. But I think one of the main characteristics of a researcher is the ability to look at a question from different points of view. And if you move, if you have been to a different country at least once in your life, you know that problems are looked at from different angles. There are different solutions from the same problem, and all of them could work. So I think it gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of adaptability. Basically, you have one more tool to make your research work. I think this is the main advantage. Of course, it's not necessary to change country at every career step. It could also be counterproductive because every time you move, you lose your part of your network at least. So it takes a lot of energy to move. One has to calibrate things.
Yeah. So you have to somehow also like keep the balance with the
Yes.
mobility.
Mhm.
So
So for me, for example, moving from Italy to Germany was easy, but I think the younger you are, the easier it is. So
okay.
easy, I say easy now that it's been like 13 years. Of course, it's a challenge because you go to a place where people don't speak your language, you don't know anyone, but still you adapt and I think it's important to move in a place that you like. So I wouldn't go to a place without first visiting the place, because it's not only the work,
Okay.
it's also being comfortable in the city where you are moving. Are the surroundings good for you, and so on. So moving to Germany, I liked it. I had some German friends. I wanted to experience the culture there, and it was really a very good experience. When I moved to France, I didn't necessarily want to go to France. I really liked the project. So I would have moved to Poland, to the UK, to Spain. I would have moved for this project. I had a tendency to stay in Europe, but I would have moved within Europe in any country. It happened to be France. I learned the French culture. It was again, it's difficult to adapt, but still you thrive in the end. I think really key is to be open, like to have especially in the first period, to have a sort of positive mindset. You always have to say yes to all what is proposed to you. At the beginning, people tell you at work, they tell you, do you want to come to our seminars and give a talk? Yes. Do you want to come and have a coffee with us? Yes. After work, the same. You want to have a beer? Yes. You have to say yes to everything, because this is the way to, in the end, to get to know the people and to feel included, let's say, the faster way possible.
Okay, yeah, I think that's like it's a good advice because also somehow when you go to new places, you also have to build a network or a community of people around you in order for you to also like feel as at home as possible, I guess, right?
Yes.
And because you need to survive also somehow, right? Outside of the lab.
Yes. No, this is very important, I think. In general, I think we can get to this later, maybe, but work-life balance is important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So for you personally, would you think that you had the support that you needed to get to the stage that you're here, or would you like something else? Can you describe like your challenges so far, or what you would like to see changed for someone else?
So let's say definitely, as I said before, you need to be lucky at some points. because if you end up in a lab, like for example, if I would have ended up in a PhD lab where people were not supporting, where people were not encouraging, I would probably not have followed the same path. So yes, if you, of course, I think everybody likes to work in environments that are pleasant. So yes, you need support in this sense. It's something that you can also actively seek. Like when you go for an interview, look at the science, but also look at the people. Like, are these people with whom you would like to stay for 3, 4, 5 years? It's important to have this kind of support. In terms of more institutional support, so that's the reason why I moved then to Austria, especially for this, let's say, hopefully last move. In France, I was permanent, so I didn't really need to move. But the way the system is built in France is that you build your research group little by little, and there is very little for me. There is very little institutional guidance. Like they don't tell you, they don't give you like an overview of the funding opportunities you have. Nobody tells you exactly, not exactly. Nobody tells you even an idea of how it works. So you have to figure out a lot of things by yourself, and it's even the locals find it difficult. So it's a very special way of working. Whereas what I'm experiencing in Austria is that people actively look for you. Like they come to you and they tell you, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Do you want to participate? So there is a bit more of institutional networking as well. It's maybe not fundamental, but it's nice.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, apart from luck, you need to have resilience and strength to live and to move on in your next steps if you find something that doesn't suit you. So you ended up in Austria being a PI, and how do you end up there?
You know, for example, that you wanted to be a PI, or that came at some point in your life? And
let's say, I think it's good to have like long-term plans, but it's also good to change them on the way, because I don't believe too much in super long-term plans. Like I think the questions like from now to 10 years, where do you see yourself? Yeah, I think it's really unpredictable. When I decided that I wanted to do a PhD in my last year of master. During PhD, I liked the academic environment, so I wanted to go for postdoc. I would have liked, in my mind, to become a PI one day, but it was not like I absolutely have to do whatever it takes. So you need some flexibility. Then I saw there was a possibility, and especially like in my last years in France, I saw that I was capable of conducting research very independently, like securing funding, organizing collaborators, and so on. And that's the point where I decided, okay, I really want to try and see what happens. I want to see how it is to have PhD students, how it is to coordinate a group, to have the full responsibility of the project.
But how easy was it for you to like forge your own path, independent of like all of your previous probably PIs or collaborators?
Yeah, so but for my PhD supervisor, that's easy because when you go for a postdoc and so when you move away for several years, in my case, like it was 8 years, you start doing something else. So there is no overlap anymore. And for my postdoc supervisor, so we do very related things because in the end, you cannot really you are in a lab and you have to work on the thematic of that lab. You cannot do something totally else. I think if you ask 100 people, you will have 100 different answers. So there is no one solution that works every time. In my case, for example, it was again step by step. Guillaume, my PI, was a slowly changing topic. He was moving from still mechanobiology, but from a more fundamental point of view, like adhesion and migration of cells. He was moving to epigenetics. I had my projects with cancer-associated fibroblasts in tumors, which I had started to develop more or less independently with my own funding, my own very little funding. So in the end, we discussed. When I told him, look, I'm actively seeking for opportunities. So when I find something, I will move. I would like to do this and that. Is it okay for the lab? Can I bring this data with me? And he was very supportive. He always agreed. So I think it's important to openly discuss these things so that there are no conflicts also. And I searched a bit, and it was in the end, it takes time. I think it took, I would say 1 year and a half, something like that, maybe 2 years from the moment when you really actively search till the very moment when you move or when you start.
Okay, yeah. So a supportive also XPI is also important
Yes.
for the road to independence.
And yes, so for example, just maybe last thing on this, I applied to some positions in France, and everywhere in France, the question was, but you're doing the same things your PI published before, because we published my last article that is more or less the basis of what we are doing now in the lab. I published with my PI. So how can people discriminate if this is your or his work? That's always a problem. So in this case, for example, it helps to move. You move somewhere else, and then you show independency. And I think in general, it's not necessary to change country, but definitely you have to change institute, better to change at least city, because you need to show independency. That is very important. If you want to secure your own funding, you need to show that you are independent.
Great. And I will go back to a question from our preliminary discussion. And the question was, any advice you would like to give to people that they are looking for a postdoc now? And you have mentioned a very important view about expectations and postdoc. So would you like to state it again and elaborate on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think postdocs are like a very important wheel of the apparatus in general, because postdocs are the very experienced people who lead students. It's a very important. There are very I would say fundamental parts of a lab. Students sometimes are, let's say, afraid to directly go to the PI for any trivial question, and this sometimes leads to mistakes that could be avoided. Maybe this is a bit less important for young PIs, because I'm still in the lab, like I do every now and then experiments. So I think students are still fine asking me. But of course, if you have a postdoc, you feel closer to the postdoc. So the student goes, let's say, find it easier to go to the postdoc. And on the same line, postdocs are extremely prepared. If we think like about industries in general, I think no industry would take a hyper qualified person, hire them for 1 or 2 years, and then let him go. This is like crazy. I don't know why the universities are doing this. This is not, I don't know, it's not working. And I think postdocs have a huge power. And I think it's important to appreciate this. Like when you go for an interview as a postdoc, first of all, it's extremely difficult to find postdocs now. So it's not only the PI that is interviewing you. I would say for the postdoc, it's more the postdoc that is interviewing the PI. Really check carefully the lab, look if you like the lab, and then as a postdoc, you are not committed to the lab. Like a PhD student, in the end, needs a title. So even if you, let's say after 2 years, you realize that you would have been better off somewhere else, but 2 years is already like more than half your PhD maybe. So you have to finish. As a postdoc, give it some time, because of course adaptation takes time, but after 6 months, 1 year, if you don't like, you should change immediately. You shouldn't, you're not bound by a title that you need. So postdocs have a huge power that should be taken into account.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
that's a very nice advice, I think.
a nice message.
Yeah. Would you think that it's still like, since we are in the era of Zoom and stuff like that, would you still think that it's important to actually visit a lab if you can before you start your postdoc, like when you are in the interview process still, or that now that we have the Zoom and stuff like that, it's okay?
I think it would be important to visit. So now I'm in the process of hiring PhD students, and I see it's not always possible. Like now we are in Austria. If we want to invite people from India or Iran, those people need a visa, and to ask for a visa for 1 day, this is like, it's not possible. So one has to compromise. But I think for me, at least personally, I would like to see the place before to move. I would like to see the people, to meet them in person, because the feeling you get when you visit in person a place is different from the feeling you get on Zoom.
Yeah, that's that's
That's
always the case, probably, right? Yeah. So since you also have been with mobility to the US for a little while, how could you describe that experience as a European researcher? And
Yeah.
do you think that, like, if people get this opportunity, they should like follow up and go and see what's happened for them? What was your experience like? And yeah, do you think that it's like also important for people to experience also that research culture or research environment too?
But so during my PhD, I had this opportunity to go for a few months to Nashville, to Tennessee. Uh, it was, let's say, to start, I would say that I would recommend anybody to do anything like that. So if you have a possibility to do a secondment in another lab, go, because every learning opportunity is never wasted. So then to go more into the detail, let's say when I went, I was very happy to come back to Europe. Let's try to separate the question in different blocks. University-wise, the place is amazing. It's like what you see in movies. For me, at least, it was like a Netflix series. Netflix was not yet, so Netflix did not exist in Europe at the time. But so you see this campus where there is everything inside. You have gyms, you have supermarkets, you have shops, and people live in the university. It's great. You get exposed to great science. You can knock the door and the professors open. They are really every time available, even for the last of the students. You go and you talk. And I think this gives confidence. That's why probably Americans are so confident, because they experience this in university. On the negative side, I would say, first of all, I think this theme of the universities being a micro universe means that universities are bubbles. So if you are in university, you don't really see what is happening outside. And I like to be like part of the tissue of the society where I live. So I don't like this aspect of being totally separated. And also, there is a different approach to research that is not my approach. For example, but you do a lot of experiments. If you have a question, if you have a precise question, you do not select the experiment you want to do. You do 5 experiments and one will give you the answer. I don't know if I'm clear.
Yeah. So they basically just go with it, and whatever gives the answer, they will just.
That's a simplification, of course, but I think it maybe gives an idea of what it is to be in the US. It's let's say, maybe it's not very nice to say. What I say is it's a napalm approach. You really try everything you can until you find the answer, but you try practically. Like my approach is more, I try to read, I select, I try one experiment, and before to do the second, I wait for the results. And I think this comes from the fact that in Italy, there is not much funding. So before to do 3 experiments, you think 10 times.
Yeah, I think it was the same for us in Greece. So yeah,
different experiences, not necessarily one is better than the other. I think it depends on also on your personality, but it's different experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's go to another important aspect. As university are bubbles, and we have to have life outside that bubble. And how important is work and life balance for you? And I know many researchers are struggling with that, but how is this for you?
It's definitely, I think, a key aspect that has to be taken into account. Let's say, before my PhD, like at university, I had like a personal rule: 1 day a week, I don't open books, I don't touch the books, nothing. Like Saturday, Sunday, 1 day of the weekend, I do absolutely nothing that is related to studies. During PhD, the rule, let's say, was not always followed. Let's put it this way, because especially when you do wet lab, when you work with cells, if you work with mice, it's even worse. It's not always possible to get days off, especially in some specific periods. But still, I think it's a good rule for life, to have a balanced life, to have some time off and for real off. Like now, I usually try not to work on the weekends. Of course, it can happen, but I tend not to work on the weekends. And something that really helps me is to have friends, to get to know people that are not academics themselves. Because then, like, they ask you questions. Like in my family, nobody is academic, so I think, I don't know, probably you are familiar with this kind of questions. Oh, you published a paper, now you are rich. No, actually, we pay to publish. And why did you do it? Well, so I think it's important to get these kind of questions because they remind you how is it to be in other environments. It's important that I think the society is not too much dispersed. It's important to remember how it works in other fields, and it's important to get other fields to know what happens at universities.
Yeah. So are you a first generation PhD in your family?
PhD, yes, but so this, I think, it doesn't mean the same thing in Italy and in the US, because in Italy, PhD programs exist since like the late 80s. So they're a very, let's say, recent invention. So yes, but I think in Italy, there is still a lot of weight on the master programs. So let's say that usually the education ends with the master. PhD is considered still some sort of work.
Okay, but do you think that people that are first generation PhDs, is it harder for them than other people that they already have, like someone that already has a PhD in their family, and how complicated that can be to navigate also like the interpersonal relationships with the family or friends that they are not in the academic field?
I think it's a very personal matter, because of course, if you have someone that can relate to your experience, you probably can exchange a bit more. So it depends how you feel about this. It's a bit like living in a foreign country where people don't speak your native language. You don't always have the same references. So sometimes you tell a story and the story means nothing to the other person. So yes, there are pros and cons. I think, for example, in terms of friends, for me it's helpful because I realize sometimes we make ourselves problems in academia, and then you tell them to outsiders, let's say, and you realize, yeah, actually, okay, they are not really problems.
Okay, yeah, I guess we have to also
So,
navigate that, right?
yeah, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a disadvantage or an advantage to be first generation PhD.
Maybe it's just, I guess that you need this support system at some point to maybe ground you a little bit more. We can move on to the next question then, I guess. Do you think that overall, now that the societies are changing and the cultures are changing, do you think that this also applies for academic institutions? And how much do you think that this has changed, like the work environment overall during like all of these years that you have been inside academic institutions? And how does this change now that younger PIs also enter academic institutions? What
Yeah,
can
I
we
think
expect from the future then?
I don't know. Let's say that this is now wishful thinking more than what will happen for real. I think that to see change in academia, we need to wait until another generation really takes the lead, like until we see rectors that are, I don't know, millennials or stuff like that.
Okay.
But we enter a system, but we have the pressure that is measured with the old parameters. Like, yes, you are now a professor, so now you have to publish with this impact factor. You have to produce this amount of graduate students and so on. Of course, things are changing because there are simply also based on experience. You live certain things in your academic career, and you say, I don't want people to relive this. Like, I remember I went to an interview. I didn't take the job. I asked, so how much is the salary? It was a postdoc interview. And the PI said, yeah, this question is not important. If you're interested about science, then all the other problems, we will find ways around. And I said, okay, see you, I will look somewhere else. I think these kind of things are changing. There is probably more, so people are more aware that this is a work, so that you need to be paid for working. But for example, already when I started my PhD in Italy, it was, I would say, normal to have a non-paid PhD. I was offered one and I left. So I think those things are disappearing because first of all, nobody takes them, luckily.
Yeah.
And second, also people are not really anymore willing to offer these kind of things. So in this sense, university is changing, but still, I would like to see changes in terms of like how we measure the impact that research makes. Is impact factor a good metrics? Maybe we need metrics, probably, yes. But isn't there another way to measure the importance of research? Like, we are all researchers in the end. Can't we just go read the paper that was published and tell whether it was good science or not, independently on the name of the journal, the number of citations, because there are so many confounding factors. If you work on a rare disease, you will not get many citations. If you are in a poor university, you're less likely to publish in Nature and Science. I think there is still this huge disproportion in terms of those parameters. So wishful thinking, I hope in 10 years it will change.
Yeah, let's see when millennials will take over the world. And let's hope that we are better than the previous generations, right?
Let's see. Because it's true, it's challenging. It's in the end, if you think about how state works, you have to tell how much funding to give to every aspect of the life. It's not only university. Of course, it would be nice to have a lot of funding, but maybe hospitals also need them, maybe schools also need them. So there is a balance. And how do you measure? You cannot be expert in all the sectors. So we need metrics. We need to find some alternative ways of measuring how research is done.
Yeah, maybe like I think that's a huge discussion that needs to be done at some point. But yeah, let's see.
So now that we have discussed all your journey, we have the question, what would you say to your younger self? And will you do all that journey over again?
I think it's been a lot of fun. So yes, I would redo it. So I have to say, with this philosophy of having a plan, but being also flexible to change it on the way, I never had really like big discomfort periods, like moments where I was saying, okay, what will I do? Of course, it happens every now and then, but it was like during COVID, I was applying for permanent positions. And I remember that I was like, okay, maybe now I have to change country again. Let's see what will happen. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do something else? But I think in the end, I think it worked out well. I liked how it went, and I would redo it definitely. So I would just say something like be prepared and have fun, something like that. Nothing special.
Yeah,
It's a good
prepared for
reminder.
the ups and downs and everything in between.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, that was fun. And from me, Konstantina, and Dimitra, and the whole Meshwork team, we would like to thank you, Francesco, for taking the time and doing this very, very, very amazing and I think fun interview with us. I think it was very informative. I hope that people will also get something out of your story and your journey. I think we discussed some important topics. And yeah, I hope that we can all meet at some point in a conference.
Yeah, definitely. We are in Extracellular Matrix, so we will meet at some point. Looking forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot again.
Thank you so much.
And all the best from now on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Then, bye.